No. God, Jaden.
Yeah, so you can't see that the producer in
Sorry,
the background is just
Jaden.
like plot twist. So I want to actually talk about the story that I have, and I think it's one of my most interesting clinical stories that I have from my years of medical school.
Do tell.
And it's just like a mess. And I feel like it's kind of a crazy story. And so I was in my 5th year of medical school. At the time, I was working at Hamilton.
Okay.
Right, and I was on my placement there on the crisis team, mental health crisis team and psychiatry. And now, if you're not familiar with what the mental health crisis team is, they're like urgent response units. So if you're in the community, if you've got a problem, you can call the urgent response team, and the mental health nurses there will triage that call and just give you advice on what to do. If they feel like it's an emergency, they may say, okay, call the police to ensure safety. But we're the psychiatric team that will go and assess the mental health of this patient that you think, or person in the community, that you think might be having a mental health emergency, right? So this could be anything from someone who's there's a real risk that's being evaluated for whether they're going to take their own life, or it could be about someone who is having a psychotic episode or something and is becoming violent, or they're in the police cell and we need to go and evaluate them. So I was working in the urgent response team as a student at the time, 5th year student. And the consultant that I was working with, he had these really, really high expectations. And the reason that he had these really high expectations is because he was an international consultant. He was trained overseas, and he had started working here. So he had just started working here. This was his first job in the country. I think he was an Indian guy, but went to university in America and was trained in America somewhere. I can't remember, in the US. And then this was his first job working in New Zealand. And I was his first student.
Oh, man.
So I was teaching him how to be a supervisor, in this New Zealand system.
Yeah.
And all of that sort of stuff as well. And I remember, so it's a 5-week or 6-week attachment. 6-week attachment. And you have this big module to do. And it's quite a heavy module. In medical school, you have to do, all these specialty related learnings. And the psychiatry module is quite dense. There's a lot of information to know. 5 days in, I go to him and I say, okay, well, like, can I get some preliminary feedback on how I'm doing with all of these things? And he's like, oh, you're like, I have like major concerns on all of these aspects. And by the way, major concerns means you fail that run. And I was like, okay, like,
Oh, God,
why? Please, and he was like, oh, well, you don't know like anything. Like you don't know these things. And it's like, you can't expect me to know everything in my first 5 days of the, I'm studying the stuff. Like I'm actually churning through it. And I was actually ahead of schedule really in my studying.
Right.
He was like, no, I've got like major issues. And I was like, holy shit, I need to actually study a lot more to actually pass this run.
Right.
And it was the same kind of standard that he held me to in clinical practice as well. Like when we were in consultations, he would, have me do the whole consultation.
Wow.
So I would be the main person leading it. I would think of the management plan, everything else, and then he would look through it and approve it, and say whether he thought it was right or wrong or whatever it was. And working with the registrars as well that are within that team. So it's not just him that I'm working with. So I'm getting a lot of experience from multiple different people, and I'm learning very fast. And I'm going home and I'm spending the whole day studying. I'm just studying.
Right.
By the end of the next week, I'd finished the whole 6 weeks worth of content. And I just bleeding my eyes out studying.
Right.
And so I ended up learning it very well. I can definitely say that was, even to this day, from that experience, my level of psychiatric knowledge and acumen is higher than any other aspect of medicine probably for me. Just because like I went through this crazy experience with, having to learn it intensely. He would say, he was going to fail me because I didn't know the exact dose and half-life of these new and novel psychiatric medications that some consultants didn't even know. And I was like, that's crazy. Like, we do these group tutorials and the person that's running the tutorial will be like, oh, does anyone know like about this medication? And I'd be like, yes, like,
Yeah.
This is the
Yeah.
half-life. This is the like bioavailability. Like
Right.
it is part of this particular neural pathway in the brain, and the way it affects is this hormone or whatever.
Right.
Like I would know everything about all of this stuff, and so because I was I ended up being really knowledgeable because I was getting so much clinical exposure. Like all my peers, they were seeing like a patient a day or something. I was seeing like 10 patients a day and doing all the reports and all the management, writing all the notes and coordinating it. In my second or third week, I was the one that was running the handover at the beginning with all the nursing stuff. It was like, okay, let's go through the patients. I'll be talking about all the patients. So I was pretty much running that sort of thing. And he was
a doctor
supervising.
Yeah.
And even the registrar would just be like following what I was saying, which is like a weird dynamic actually to think about. And the nursing staff all ended up really trusting me as a result of it. And obviously everything was signed off by my seniors, so everything was meant to be safe. So we did that for a while. But then his own like clinical skills, my consultant's clinical skills, were like a little bit weird, honestly. He was a weird dude.
Okay.
Like really, he was a weird dude. And the nurses were not really happy when he would just do consults by himself. So they would only they would delay consults sometimes so that I would be available to do it with him instead of just doing it by himself. Or they'd get a registrar to
How
do
was
it
he
as well.
weird?
His EQ was low.
His
EQ was low. He just he couldn't really quite, and his communication technique was quite
in the
awkward.
psych department as well, you'd expect you'd
Yeah,
want
yeah.
that to be important.
What it is, right? Yeah, and a lot of good psychiatrists have very good communication and can
yeah.
make you feel really at ease. But it was a little bit like, it was almost like cartoonish, you know? Like how you know, if you have like cartoons, you have certain aspects of a personality that are like really amplified and some things that are like not there at all. Like you have a personality that's like quite skewed. Like there's certain things that, you know, are really present. But so he had that real weird kind of character to him. And as like, I remember some patients actually saying to me when he leaves the room, he's just like, yeah, this dude is weird. Like, I can't connect to this guy. But they were, you know, fortunately for them, you know, for these clients that were in the room with us, like, fortunately for them, they were able to connect with me in that situation, or with the registrar or someone else that was there, or with the nurse. But the nurses were starting to pick up on that. And so they weren't happy if he was just doing it
by himself.
Well, there's always a nurse present,
right?
As a chaperone, but like, if he was the main kind of medical side that was doing it. So that was kind of how it developed, and I worked my butt off to meet these super high standards. Good thing is the standards didn't increase. They were like really high and they just stayed there. So I was just able to progressively meet them. Yeah. And I ended up getting a distinction for the run.
I hope so. What, based on his standards?
Yeah. So he marked me as a distinction for the run, and he like, I learned a lot. Like I learned a lot. You know, it was really intense run, but I just learned like crazy. Got my distinction. 3 months later, in the news, he's going to prison because he's not a real psychiatrist.
No! Oh my God, Jaden!
Yeah, so you can't see that the producer in the background is just like plot twist. So now, like, the thing is that he had the same name as the person that they were meant to be hiring.
Get out.
Now, he was a doctor.
Okay.
He was what we think as he was a trainee in a psychiatric program, but wasn't a consultant.
Right.
So he did have psychiatric knowledge. And honestly, his level of psychiatric knowledge was just too high for it to not be someone with a lot of psychiatric experience, or a doctor at least.
Okay.
So it wasn't like just a random person.
Yeah.
But he wasn't a psychiatrist.
Right.
He wasn't a qualified specialist.
SMO,
Yeah, a senior medical officer. He wasn't. And that's a problem and that explains why his clinical skills were just not really up to scratch. You know, not even as good as the registrar's, not even as good as mine as a fifth-year student, right? And so the way it worked is one of the nurses was suspicious and actually launched an investigation and just looked into it. And it turns out that it was the wrong person. He had actually created fraudulent documents to support his qualification to get the job. And he was sort of like supporting his wife and daughter or something in the States or something with their income. So it's kind of sad, but like, I mean, at the end of the day, it was very unsafe, especially on the crisis team with urgent response unit, where we're seeing, like, and I think about some of the patients that we were seeing, or sorry, not patients, you know, people in the community that we were seeing. Yeah. And they I just think, whoa, like, they really they really deserve to have had a real psychiatrist at that instance, not just this quirky dude. And so he ended up going to prison. And I think he's currently serving his time.
Wow. Still.
Yeah. And in New Zealand, I think. And he's just, so that's the way that it played out. And now the thing is that the story really continues because I hear this, right, in the news. I see it on the news. And the university emails me saying, okay, your distinction has been downgraded to a pass.
To a what?
A pass. And so
you went through hell.
I went through hell, and like my clinical knowledge was legitimately good because I was learning and I was getting a lot of experience, and I wasn't learning the clinical stuff. I was learning off of him. He was just telling me study a lot, and I was studying it off of reputable sources.
Right.
So they put my distinction down to a pass. Now this was really important for me because now I wouldn't normally care.
Right.
Because when I was in 4th year, my first ever run of the year, I failed that run, which was general medicine because I had learned everything theoretically and I just could not apply the information in clinical practice. And so my boss at the time gave me all the various concerns. And he was like, I'm actually going to pass you, but I think there's concerns you need to work on. It turns out the way he scored me based on the algorithm actually fails me. So I ended up failing that run.
Right.
And so to recover from that, in 4th year, I ended up getting distinction for three more runs after that to sort of prove that, it was just this hiccup that like I am able to adapt.
Yeah.
And so I ended up adapting to it through the rest of 4th year. But as a result, I didn't end up, doing that badly for that rest of the year. I did quite well.
Right.
However, I got tagged. And what that means is that you get a close eye look at you. Yeah. And at the end of your 5th year, you have to sit another big OSCE. Right. So if you don't know what
fail anything between 4th and 5th year.
If you either fail the year or you sit another OSCE. So at the end of 4th year, at least in Auckland, there is a big OSCE, and an OSCE is a
what does it stand for?
Is a something I don't know what O and S stand for.
Clinical examinations.
Yeah, it's clinical examination. It's basically your
student.
You get tested on your clinical skills, and it's not a written thing. It's you have either real patients or actors that you're doing examinations and you present your findings and you talk about management. So it's a very clinical based thing. So at the end of 4th year is this big one, and I'd passed that, and that was fine. So I was moving on to 4th year. And Otago, it's at the end of 5th year. It's a big one. It's a huge exam.
Right.
So normally at the end of 5th year, as long as you do well and pass all your runs and you do your progress tests well, which is these written examinations that you do, you will pass the year. Right. For me as a tagged student, I would have to sit another OSCE at the end of 5th year, which is meant to be even harder.
Right.
And that was stressing me out. I was like, I do not want to. And I read the thing and it says that if you get distinction for 3 or more major clinical attachments throughout the year, you will be exempt from that OSCE. Now, a lot of people didn't know that.
Right.
In fact, I only discovered it by accident because my friend happened to read it in the guide and sent it to me.
Yeah.
And I just had missed that line because it's just a single sentence.
Yeah.
And so I was like, okay, I'm going to get these 3 distinctions. So I got this distinction in psychiatry. Now, the time I heard that my thing was getting downgraded to a pass, I'd gotten 2 other distinctions.
Okay.
So I was in the clear.
Yeah.
The only runs I had left were, I can't remember exactly what the runs were, but I was thinking it's much riskier for me now to be able to get it. I would have to get the distinction for my final run or something like that.
Yeah, yeah.
And it was I was getting really nervous.
Yeah.
So I was like, I need that distinction.
Right.
I need that distinction. And I called the uni and I was super pissed off at them. I was like, you need to give me my distinction back.
Yeah.
And so they organized another a repeat assessment for me to do.
Okay.
That would test.
From psych?
Yeah, in psych.
In psych.
So now here's the thing though.
Is there a psych test?
There's an assessment that you do at the end of every attachment.
Okay.
And they got me to redo that attachment, that assessment.
Yeah.
The thing is, by the time I'm redoing my assessment, it's like almost 6 months later.
Yeah.
I haven't studied psych in 6 months.
Yeah.
I've been studying everything else in between that.
Yeah.
So I'm panicking because you don't study something for 6 months. Yeah, the knowledge is still kind of there, but it's not as sharp, and the clinical skills are just not as, quick and automatic as it's meant to be, especially not when I was at the peak at the end of the run.
Yeah, yeah.
So I'm sort of stressing out about this, and I'm thinking, okay, I really need to, buckle down and do the, assessment and get the distinction again. And I'm like, okay, when is it? And they tell me it's tomorrow. Right. And I'm like, you're telling me at 7 p.m. that at 10 a.m. tomorrow, I've got my repeat assessment for psych 6 months out of studying for it. You're giving me 1 evening to prepare for it. So I prepared for it. I did my repeat assessment the next day. I got my distinction again. And he even wrote me a really long reference saying that my clinical ability was way higher than he
Thank
would have.
God.
So happy ending, but crazy story.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
And so that was that year. And then psych continues to be an interesting experience for me. The next year.
Oh gosh.
So actually, the next year I do my honors research. So
Oh, yeah.
I take the year off. The year after, I'm a final year medical student. I'm doing my psych attachment again because you do another psych attachment in your final year. And I was with a really good team. My consultant was great. My registrar was great. Everything was great. It was awesome. I was in the Pacific mental health unit, which is so cool. Like you sing songs at the beginning of the day. Like
wow.
it was very wholesome. They were good. It was great. Awesome attachment. At that time, I'm tutoring. So at this time, I've already got my company, right?
Yeah, JJ, yeah.
At that time, one of my students is like quite depressed and is relying on me like during that time. And it's starting to stress me out.
Yeah.
And she's relying on me more and more and more. And there's, I had to call the police on her one time because I thought she was going to jump out the window and like commit suicide. Right. So I was really worried. And I would, it was to the point where I was spending something like 10 plus hours a week on the phone with her talking just to like pretty much do counseling effectively because she just didn't want to talk to anyone else about it. And I was like, you need to really be talking. And she had a lot of issues. Like her family was really stigmatizing it and issues like that. And I was like, you need to get more people to support you. But she was completely unwilling. I was like, you need to talk to your GP. She was completely unwilling. I was like, okay, look, all this pressure was put onto me. I was working in psych at the time. So I talked to my consultant. I was like, look, this is what's going on. What do I do? You need to give me advice. It's stressing me out like crazy. And she was like, okay, you need to do this and this and this, remove myself a little bit, take the pressure off of me. It shouldn't be centralized. I need to get other people involved, need to whatever. And like, if issues happen, you need to call the crisis team and things like that. So I was like, okay. So there was a point where I had to call the police again, a second time. And I was like, okay, you need to get seen by someone. You need to be formally seen by mental health services. And, at this whole time I'm thinking, man, this girl's like depression is just so extreme, like she's extreme, like she's almost like catatonic something. She's just like not moving. She just doesn't like, she just sleeps all day or like just doesn't eat all day, like just sits there for like hours, not speaking, not talking, not like nothing. And like very depressed or like just crying and in tears all the time. And like very like dependent on me. And later, when I call the police again, they escort her to the emergency department. I think it's like 1 a.m. I go to the emergency department to be her like one and only support person. It just so happens it's my friend's sister, who's the psychiatric registrar on for the night.
Wow.
She comes in, examines her, and then she comes out and she's like, I don't think it's depression. I think it's borderline personality disorder. And I'm just like, at that moment, it just clicks. Now, people that aren't listening, if you don't know what borderline personality disorders, personality disorders are different to something like depression. Depression is a state of, you fulfill certain criteria, but it's effectively, you're sad, but you're sad for an extended period of time, and your brain actually starts to rewire to almost forget how to be happy. And it's quite a complicated sort of thing, psychologically speaking. Certainly, the myth of you can just kind of choose to be happy is so wrong in so many ways that it's to be, pinnacle of ignorance. But there's a very clear distinction between that and personality disorder. Personality disorder is something that usually forms from childhood. It takes a long time. There's usually a trigger of something of some kind in their parenting or upbringing that has made them maladaptive to deal with certain types of stress. So borderline personality disorder is a type of personality disorder typically associated with females. In actual fact, there's an equal lifetime prevalence in males and females, but there's a myth that's actually mostly in females. But actually, it's an incredibly difficult personality disorder to deal with because the way that they deal with insecurity and stress and a lack of attention and love is to manipulate the people around them, to seek that attention and love that they were potentially missing in childhood. A lot of males that have a kind of what's conventionally typically a male equivalent of borderline personality disorder is antisocial personality disorder. And that's what we normally call a psychopath.
Wow.
right? Which is a manipulative. They don't have
Oh.
value of human emotion as much. They're very highly manipulative.
Yeah.
Emotionally very volatile and fluctuant. And it's the same with borderline, is that they are very emotionally fluctuant. They're very black and white. They do this thing called splitting, where it's like, yeah, you're the best person. You do one thing wrong, it's like you're the worst. Not only you, your whole family, everyone that's like you is the worst.
Right.
They have a good experience with a doctor. Doctors are great. This doctor's awesome. They don't give them just enough medication. They want a 1 week, but they only get 5 days. Doctors are the worst. Doctors are useless.
Yeah.
Like they have this very black and white
Right.
splitting kind
I'm
of
learning
behavior.
so much right now here.
Yeah, so it's a very different situation. Because the
Okay.
thing is with borderline personality disorder, if you give them what they want, it makes it worse.
Right.
So you shouldn't be admitting them into hospital unless it's just imminently for the threat of their life. If they're in, they have to get out straight away.
Yeah.
Hospitalization makes it worse.
Right.
So in this situation, I'm like, oh my God, like this is at a point where I already know a lot about psychiatry.
Yeah.
You know, and borderline, like the number of borderline patients and depression patients I've seen are so many at that stage. Yet this person that was intimately involved, like outside of work,
Yeah.
that I'd seen develop over the course of months,
Yeah.
I just didn't catch it, that it was borderline instead of
Wow.
depression.
Depression.
And so I ended up having this crazy, again, super stressful experience where I was treading on eggshells the entire time with this person with borderline personality disorder. And the story continues the year after.
No.
So now then I graduate, and then so you know, when you graduate, you can have these preferences for where you want to be working, and you select like 11 preferences.
Right. I've heard this. Yeah.
And I was like, okay, look, I don't really want to do psychiatry.
You probably had a good experience.
Yeah.
With it.
I feel like, because I don't want to do psychiatry as a career. So for me as a house officer, to gain experience in psychiatry is kind of meaningless, because I've just already had such an extensive experience with psychiatry. Especially because of my fifth year, that reassessment that I had to do. It just really consolidated psychiatry incredibly strongly. So I didn't feel like it was going to be beneficial for my career development to be better at psychiatry. I think every doctor needs to be good at psychiatry.
Yeah.
To a level of basic competency. It's critical, I think. It's one of the most important specialties to have good competency in. But I already had that level of competency. I wasn't really worried about that. And I didn't want to start on a surgical run, because I thought it was going to be too intense to start on a surgical run.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to do geriatrics as well, old people's health, just because I thought the pace wasn't really up to like my personality. I don't have anything against old people's health or geriatrics. It just wasn't my personality type. I wanted to do more surgical runs, and I wanted to have general medicine, because general medicine is the run that I failed initially in fourth year, got distinction in my final year, and I wanted to have more general medical experience, because it's one of the critical runs of a first year doctor getting general medical experience.
Right.
So I laid out my preferences in that way, and then in like 10th and 11th preference, you don't have preference. It's just you're doing whatever.
Yeah. Filling the list for the sake of filling the list. Yeah.
And so all I did is that, like at that stage, I had 10 preferences for, you know, things that were not starting surgical, no psychiatry, not geriatrics, and having a general medicine run in there. And then I got my 11th preference assigned to me, which was starting with surgery, back-to-back psychiatry and geriatrics, and no general medicine. I got literally the 4 things that I was, the only criteria to avoid, I got all 4 of them. And so my run started off that way. And anyway, so psychiatry was one of my runs.
As a house officer.
As a first-year house officer. And the team I was assigned to, and I'm just going to not go into specifics here, but the team I was assigned to was notorious for being difficult. Being a difficult team, because the way that the team was structured and worked, and the particular sort of, I guess, in a way, management style that the consultant had is one that is very safe. And there's nothing wrong with being safe, but it means that it's a lot of work, because if you're too safe, you do things that are potentially unnecessary. And all that work, it's not like they're the ones that are ordering the forms. It's on you. So it increases your workload by a lot. So I was probably doing, realistically, like almost the amount of work that the other 3 house officers of the 3 other teams were doing combined. So it was, not quite, but like almost. Yeah. You know, it was a lot of work. And so I ended up getting this psychiatric experience as a doctor when I was first working there,
Right.
of incredible tedium and boredom, of where like I just felt that the whole thing was like, I really don't think that this is good
Yeah.
practice.
Yeah.
And like every ounce of it, like, because before that I had these weird experiences with psychiatry, but academically speaking, I actually still enjoyed the subject, and it's still speaking, I actually enjoy it.
Mm.
And then that run just stripped all professional interest of psychiatry out of my system completely.
Right.
And it ended up being like a way to round it off. Is that okay? Like I was really, in fact, I was really interested in psychiatry going into medicine. It was one of the fields that I was most interested in.
Oh, okay.
And in fifth year, I was like, wow, this is crazy, but like I'm still really interested. In my final year of medical school, I was like, this is also pretty crazy, but I probably don't want to do this because it's just not the type of work that I enjoy.
Mm-hmm.
First year house officer, it's just like, there's no possible damn way I'm going to do this job. If I have to do this job for even a week longer, I want to quit. I wanted to quit because of that one run. It was just mind-numbingly, like my mental health deteriorated that run because of the work that I was doing in mental health. And then so that's, I mean, the conclusion to my saga in psychiatry. And now running a company, I'm really interested in running mental health initiatives. But someone else is gonna run them.
Get some other expert to do it, right?
Yeah. And so that's the story of me and my psychiatrist. So all my friends know that I've got this really interesting love-hate kind of relationship with psychiatry. Less love actually, but this weird kind of experience I've had with psychiatry. Now, just to make it like really clear, like I don't have anything against psychiatry. I just think my personal experience with it was I was very unlucky.
Yeah.
I think I was just very unlucky, but you know, it is what it is. And I was fortunate enough to have some great experience with, like, in psychiatry with other consultants in different situations.
Yeah,
that were great, and I just thought, wow, these are like really good doctors.
Right.
That were totally different experience to my other experiences,
so
but
nice.
but that wasn't my experience.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, so
Do you think that? I mean, this is another big question. I'm not sure we can leave it for another time or not. But do you think that whole experience, even just starting out as a house officer, influenced you later on, or it had a role in you leaving the health?
I think it did.
Healthcare?
Yeah, I think it did. Other thing is, mental health is like super underfunded.
Oh yeah,
really underfunded.
Okay.
Like ridiculously so. Given how big of an issue it is with youth suicide and youth mental health in New Zealand, like the level of underfunding is just ridiculous.
I know that like seeking mental health services by the public scheme is a lot more tedious, or it just takes a lot longer. The wait list is ridiculous or something.
Yeah,
like 6 months or something.
Or like a psychologist.
For a psychologist, right.
Yeah, which is a huge shortage. There's like a 200-to-1 ratio of patients with psychologists. Yeah. It's a massive waiting list.
How
super broken. I mean, there's a whole other issue, and I don't want to go into speculating it because I don't know the full details. I have certain theories about why it is the way that it is, but
okay.
You know, we'll talk about it another time. But another time, like a lot of these things. But I think it probably did contribute to me wanting to leave to some degree. Definitely not all the way, because I just thought, because the run I had after that, geriatrics, older people's health, which I was dreading, I ended up really enjoying. I really loved it. It was one of my favorite runs, actually. Not only the team, but like the other house officers I was working with, the whole environment, the work that I was doing. It was, and I actually had a lot more time to sit and talk with patients, and I actually ended up really enjoying that because I kind of forgotten at that stage. I was so jaded about it.
Yeah. You appreciate the things that you previously didn't.
Yeah. Stuff that I was like kind of got like sick of. I started really kind of, so I actually really enjoyed that run.
Jerry, as you said.
The thing that really got me was the health system related stuff, which I just and the personality related things. I'll talk about that again
in another
time. In another video. However, it was not the sort of ideal kind of experience. And I think every student has this kind of horror story that they've got at some point in their clinical career. They'll have that one run or something where they just really clashed, and it doesn't reflect the career, but it's just an unlucky experience sometimes. It just makes for a fun story. At the end of the day, it makes for a fun story.
Yeah, well, I hope it did, because that was a roller coaster.
Yeah, there was a roller coaster, and there was a roller coaster reaching us to the end. Right. So, thanks if you have been for listening. If you wanna watch us on video, we've got the stuff on YouTube, Facebook. Follow us on their Subcut.
Like and subscribe.
You've got.
I can't believe I'm saying that.
You've got we're really open to getting feedback about what we are doing well, what we're doing wrong, what topics to cover, what topics not to cover, and all these different, lots of different ideas on what you guys as listeners can be contributing. And we want to have a lot more stuff going on, interviews, guests, bunch of cool stuff.
Send your ideas through.
Yeah, send your ideas. Well, all of your ideas will be super, super appreciated, and it's going to help us do a better job at entertaining you.
Yeah.
So, thanks for listening, and we'll tune in next time.
Wrapped up. Oh, gosh.
Thanks for tuning in to Subcut. If you guys have any suggestions for content, please make sure you send it through.
You can get in touch and follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube, or find us on our website at jttmed.com/subcut.
Subcut is a podcast brought to you by JTT. If you or anyone you know is interested in a career in medicine, make sure to get in touch and check us out at jttmed.com.